Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav and we will be learning today Mirza Hashem Daf Kuf Lamed Daled Amid Beis. So we've been discussing the halachas of Hoshana Rabbah and we have been discussing the what's the word I'm looking for? What the exact procedure is for doing the hakafas and the chibut ha'aravos on Hoshana Rabbah. Now, in Sif Gimel, on Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, we had the sheet of the Mechaber. The Mechaber brought down two different opinions of how we should do the hakafas on Hoshana Rabbah. The question being, should we hold the lulav, or should we hold the arava, or should we hold both? And in Sif Gimel, the Mechaber noted the first opinion that says, and that was the Ran, and the Ran says that Rashi holds that way, that the hakafas were done with the lulav, with the daled bita, with the lulav and the esrig, and not with the hashanas. Now that could be either because you hold that the hakafas in the Beis Hamikdash were actually done with the daled minim and not with the aravas, and that would be the sheet of the Rambam. The Rambam held that the Kahana made the hakafas around the Mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash with the daled minim, not with the aravas. They never made hakafas with the aravas, according to the Rambam. The aravas, they did nanuim with the aravas, and they stood the aravas up next to the Mizbeach. But according to the Rambam, they never actually made hakafas with the aravas. So then it would make perfect sense that on Hoshana Rabbah, when we make Nezechel Hamikdash, and the truth is, all Yom Tov, when we make the hakafas as a Nezechel Hamikdash, we do it with the daled minim. Then there's another opinion that says that we should go around with the daled minim and the aravas. And the Mishnah Berurah said that that's kind of in order to try b'yoytz of both shitas. This way you have the lulav, you have the daled minim, and you also have the aravas. That's what the Mechaber said in Sif Gimel. Now we're holding 3 lines off the bottom of Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph in the words of the Ramah. And now the Ramah is going to talk about what we should do. Says the Ramah, Hagah. Va'aminig Pashut, the simple minig, says the Ramah, is Litail ha'arava, to take the hashanis im halulav b'shachris b'shas hananua. And now I'm reading the Ramah just as it's written. You know, the truth is, I didn't do this, but I really should. Let me take a quick look. I'm sorry, I never like to do this in middle of the share, but it just occurred to me that I did not look at the Darkei Moshe in the Torah. And sometimes when you look at the Darkei Moshe, you're in for a surprise, and you get a little bit of a greater insight as to what the Ramah means in the Hagah on the Shulchan Aruch. So bear with me here for one quick second. Darkei Moshe. So that is the case here. Yes, so I do get a little bit of an insight from the Darkei Moshe here. And I'll explain to you what my question was. The Ramah says like this, V'aminig Pashut, the minig Pashut, the simple minig is, Litail ha'arava, to take the hashanis, im halulav, together with the lulav, when? B'shachris, by shachris, b'shas hananua, at the time that you make the nanuim with the daled minim, u b'shas hakafa, and when you make the hakafas, you should take the aravas with the daled minim, ad shas hachabota, until it's time to make the chibut ha'aravos, the noitlim ha'arava levada, and at that point you take the hashanas alone. So the Ramah, again, a simple reading, the Ramah says, what's the minig hapashut? The minig hapashut is that you take the lulav together with the hashanas from the beginning, b'shachris b'shas hananua, by shachris, when you first make the na'anuim with the daled minim, you take the aravas, and you hold the hashanas together with the daled minim all the way through the hakafas by hashanas. You make the hakafas with both the daled minim and the hashanas, and you hold the lulav and the esrig and the hashanas all the way through all of the tefillas of the Hashanahs, and only all the way at the end, when it's time for the chibut Hashanahs, when it's time to bang the Hashanahs and make the nanuim with the Hashanahs, then you put down the Daled Minim and you hold the Hashanahs alone. That's what the Ramah seems to say right here. Now, my question on this Ramah was, we learned in the Mechaber, in Siv Zayin. In the Mechaber in Siv Zayin, the Mechaber brought down a Yesh Bisha Omer. We said this is the Rashbash. The Mechaber says that you should not hold the Hashanahs together with the Daled Minim when you make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav. When you take the Daled Minim with the bracha to be Yotze the mitzvah of Daled Minim on Hoshana Rabbah, the Mechaber brings down the Rashbash that you should not hold the Hashanahs together with the Daled Minim, because that could potentially be a question of Baal Tosef. That's what the Rashbash said. And the Mechaber said that he disagrees with the Rashbash. He holds that there is no Shaila of Baal Tosef, because again, we said that that's the Mechaber Lishitasai, who holds that you could, all Yom Tov long, you could have as many Hadassim and as many Aravas as you want, and there's no problem of Baal Tosef. But the Mechaber agreed that really you should be chayshish for this Rashbash, and there is no reason to take the Hashanahs together with the Daled Minim when you make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav and then shake it. Better take the Daled Minim themselves and go ahead and make the bracha and be yotze the mitzvah, and then afterwards, then you could go pick up the Hashanahs together with the Aravas. Now, my question on this Ramah was, the Ramah says, "V'aminik pashut lital ha'arava im halulav b'shachris b'shas haninua." What does the Ramah mean by that? Does the Ramah mean when you make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav, that the minik pashut is not like the Rashbash and not like the Mechaber who says that you should be chayshish for the Rashbash? And the Ramah is saying that you should take the Hashanahs together with the Lulav and the Esrog, B'shas HaNanua, meaning at the time that you make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav, and you first make the Nanuim on Hoshana Rabbah. Is that what he means? Or did he mean maybe after you first make the bracha? And B'shas HaNanua maybe means during Hallel, when you make the Nanuim during Hallel. I wasn't 100% sure. Now, when I looked at the Darkei Moshe over here, what I found is the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah on the tour, the Darkei Moshe says, "V'haminik eino kein, ela oichsen hahishanis im halulav b'shas netilas lulav, b'shas netilas lulav v'hakafa." And he brings this down from the Maharil. So it's very clear that the Ramah seems to mean that you take the Hashanahs together with the Daled Minim, actually when you make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav. Now that's what the Ramah says over here. Let's take a look first at the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Chav Hei. The Mishnah Berurah says, Ubishas HaKafa, Tama Minig, the rationale for this minig would be Kidei Lotzeis Kol Hadeis, in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah according to all the various opinions. The Yesharmim the Makifim Balulav, because you have those shittas that say that you make the hakafas around the bima on Hoshana Rabbah with the lulav and esrog. The Yesharmim the Makifim Ba'arava, and there are those that say that you make the hakafas only with the Hashanahs. So we're going to try to be Mekayim both, and we're going to make the hakafas with the Daled Minim and with the Hashanahs. The Chanal B'Sif Gimel, like we already mentioned, the Mechaber brought this down in Sif Gimel to try to be Yotze all the shittas. What's interesting is, again, what the Ramah is suggesting at the beginning of this Hagah is that on Hoshana Rabbah, you take the Hashanahs together with the Daled Minim from the moment that you first pick up the Daled Minim and make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav, and you hold the Hashanahs and the Daled Minim all the way from then, all the way through the Hakafas. Now, by the Hakafas, there's a strong rationale to do that, because you want to be Mekayim both shittas. Should you make the Hakafas with the Lulav, or should you make the Hakafas with the Hashanahs? But why do you have to hold the Hashanahs when you make the bracha of Al Netilas Lulav? That's an interesting question. But clearly, the Ramah over here is suggesting that at the beginning of this Hagah. Now let's go weiter in the Ramah, 2 lines off the bottom near the end of the line, right by the Ois Katan Chavav for the Mishnah Berurah, where the Ramah says, however, V'yoyser toiv, it would be even better, Shaloi litla im halulav klal. Not to hold the Hishanis together with the Daled Minim at all, period. Not by the bracha, not by Hallel, not by the Hakafis. No, at no point should you hold the Lulav and Esrig and the Hishanis together. Says the Mishnah, the Yosef Tov Shaloi Litla Malulav. Why? Kedei sheyikayim b'shleimus mitzvahs netilas arava. Because we want it to be very clear that there's a separate mitzvah of Hishanis. And therefore, when it's time to be becoming the mitzvah of Hishanis, we put down the Daled Minim and we pick up the Hishanis. The Kanal b'Sif Hey, like we saw earlier in Sif Hey, when the Mechaber said, "Ve'ena nitelas ela b'fnei atzma." We take the Hishanis, we take it by itself. Shelo yegoy davar achiv ima. Certainly, you should not tie anything together to the Hishanis, because you want it be yotze the mitzvah. You want to have a strong hecker. You want it to be very recognizable that this is a separate mitzvah that we're going to be mekayim the minig hanavim of Hishanis. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here, nice cut l'chavav. V'gam ha'arizal his here ma'oid shaloi lechaber ha'arava im halulav. The Ari also said very strongly that we should not take the lulav and esrog together with the Hishanis. It's a separate mitzvah, and we should perform it very clearly separately. Okay. Continues the Ramah in the middle of the last line here in the Shulchan Aruch. Va'af ha'noitla im halulav. And even, says the Ramah, those that follow what the Ramah termed as the minig poshut, those who do take the Hishanis together with the lulav, at least for part of the time, nearly, it appears to me, says the Ramah, the la'achar shahikif, after they make the hakafas. So somebody who had the minig to take the Daled Minim together with the Hishanis during the hakafas of the Hishanis, nearly the la'achar shehikif, after the hakafas are over, Yasser halulav miyadai, he should put the lulav down, the yechois ha'arava shehem ha'hishanis she'oisin, and he should pick up the aravas, meaning the Hishana bundle that we made, levad, and he should hold that alone, kolzman she'oimrim tachanunim alamayim, the entire time that you're saying the tefillas and the bakashas that have to do with water, umenanim ha'hishanis b'shah she'oimrim ha'hishanis, and we make nanuim with the Hishanis, while we're saying the Hishanis, va'achakach, and at the end, that's when we bang them on the ground. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is cut l'chav zayin on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. The la'achar shehikif yaser alulav biyadai. Ritzayna Laimar. What the Ramah wants to say is, the loy k'moshe oichsen alulav im ha'arava achas hakabata. Don't do like those who hold the Daled Minim together with the Hishanis all the way throughout the tefillah of the Hishanis, all the way till the end, till it's time to bang the Hishanis. Don't do that. Ubizmanenu, and the Chavetz Chaim says in our days, Haminig k'moshe kasav Ramah. The minig is like what the Ramah said previously. She'ein neitlin ha'arava im halulav klal. We don't take the Hishanis together with the Daled Minim at all. And the minig pashut b'medinoi seinu is that we hold the Daled Minim for the hakafas around the bima. Most people continue to hold the Daled Minim until a certain point in the tefillas of the Hishanis. Most people, I think, until Ta'aneh Emunim, and by Ta'aneh Emunim, they put down the Daled Minim and they pick up the Aravas. I noted my minig based on my Rebbe, so Stark, Berurah Feinstein Shlita, is to hold the Daled Minim until Ta'aneh Emunim, and then to put them down, pick up the Hishanis, to make Na'anuim with the Hishanis by Kol Mavasim V'Omer, the same way we make Na'anuim with the Lulav and Esrig, and then at the end of the davening to go bang them. Now, I did bring up with me an Aruch HaShulchan, because the Aruch HaShulchan Kedarkei BaKodesh had a very, very clear, concise paragraph about this. Let me find it here. V'Rabbeinu Aramah Kasav, the Ramah writes, Al Zed Haminik Poshet Lital Ha'arava Im Alula B'Shakris B'Shas HaDe'anua U'B'Shas HaKafa Chas Chabata. That's what the Ramah said first, is the minik Poshet, that you should take the aravas, the ishanis, together with the daled minim throughout, from when you make the bracha of al natilas lulav through the hakafas all the way till the end, until it's time to make the chabata and then to put down the daled minim. Va'az noitlam ha'arava lavada. At that point, you hold the ishanis alone. But the Ramah said, "V'yoyser tov shaloi litla im halulav." It's klal. It's better, said the Ramah, that you shouldn't hold the daled minim with the ishanis at all. Va'af ha'noitla. Even the ones who do hold it together with the lulav, after the hakafas, they should put the lulav down. That's just a repeat of the Ramad Kan Lushoina. Ukvar bi Arnu. And the Aruch HaShulchan says, I already explained. Shanu oisin kaderach hayoser toiv shakasav. We follow the yoser toiv minig that the Ramah said, which is never to hold the daled minim with the lulav at all. Ve'einanu mechabrin la'olam ha'arava im halulav. We never attach in any way. We don't even hold them at the same time. The ishanis with the daled minim. Elarak halulav lavadai. We make hakafas and everything else with the lulav alone. V'gam be'es amiras ha'ishanis anu toisin rak halulav lavadai. And we hold the daled minim alone throughout most of the tefillas of the Hishanis. Bahagienu el tefillas ta'an emunim. But when we reach the paragraph of ta'an emunim, manichem alulav, that's when we put down the lulav, v'noitlen ha'arava ad chabata, and then we hold the Hishanis until it's time to bang them. Gam ha'na'anua b'harava ein anu noyegin. Aruch HaShulchan says that we're not noyeg like the Ramah to make na'anuim with the Hishanis. But the Aruch HaShulchan says, "V'roi lochush l'dvarav u'lenanek tzas." However, we should be a little bit concerned with the sheet of the Ramah, and we should make a little nanuim with the Hishanis. I told you my minig is that I do make nanuim. Okay, so that was the paragraph of the Aruch HaShulchan. Okay. Now finally we come to Sif Ches. Says the Mechaber, Yesh Bisha Omer, there are those that say, Shahishana Shabalulav, that the aravas that are in the lulav, afal pishen is rekes, even though me ikradin, you're allowed to throw them away. Ein lifsaya aleha, you should not step on them. V'ayin le'el siman chaf aleph kabei tzitzis. I'm a little bit puzzled by this mechaber. The mechaber is making reference over here to the aravas that are in the lulav. And he says that afal pishen is rekes, even though technically speaking, the aravas in the lulav are allowed to be thrown away. Still at all, even though you're allowed to throw them away, you should not step over them. You should not treat them in an oifen of bezoyin. Now the Mishnah Berurah says over here, the same halacha that the Mechaber says over here about the aravas that are in the lulav also applies to the aravas of the Hishana bundle. Aval pishen is rekes, even though really you're allowed to throw them away. Ein levsaya aleha, you shouldn't step on them. Ein, says the Mishnah Berurah over here, v'huadin arava shal Hishana ein lezalzel ba, you shouldn't treat it with zilzul. And the Ramah puts over here in the parentheses, v'ayin le'el siman chaf aleph kabei tzitzis, he references us to Siman Chaf Aleph by the halacha of tzitzis. And the Mishnah Berurah says in Chav Tes, Ritzaina Loimar, what the Ramah wants to say is, Ma de bevur sham besif Aleph bahagah, the words of the Ramah in Siman Chaf Aleph in Shulchan Aruch in Hilchas Tzitzis. So over there in Siman Chaf Aleph, we're talking about the strings of tzitzis. The Mechaber says, Chute tzitzis shenifsiku, the strings of tzitzis that got ripped, Yochel lezarkon la'ashpa. The Mechaber says you're allowed to actually throw them in the garbage. Says the Mishnah Berurah over there in Ois Katan Aleph, V'hu adin l'chol tashmishe mitzvah. That's really the ikar adin, the halacha, of any mitzvah item. Kigoin sukkah, like a sukkah. V'lulav, or a lulav. V'shayfer. All of these are chafetze mitzvah. These are objects that were used for the performance of a mitzvah. V'chol kahai gavna, or anything else of that nature. Any item that was used for the performance of a mitzvah. La'achar shenisbatlu, when they're no longer used, when they're not ready to be used for their mitzvah anymore, they no longer have any kedusha. They don't have kedusha to them anymore. The fact that it was used for a mitzvah does not imbue the chayfetz with kedusha. Now this stands in contrast to tashmishe kedusha. Let's say the mantle of a Sefer Torah. The mantle of a Sefer Torah is tashmishe kedusha. Tashmishe kedusha do have kedusha, and they need geniza. You're not allowed to throw them out. But the aravas that were in the lulav, so kolzman, you're being mekayim the mitzvah with them, so it's a dvar mitzvah. But once the mitzvah is over and you're not going to use it for the mitzvah anymore, now it's not imbued with everlasting kedusha. Now technically you're allowed to just throw it away. Now the Ramah over here in Siman Chaf Aleph says, V'yesh omrim, there are those that say, Da'af la'achar shenifseku, even after the strings of tzitzis were ripped off, so they're not going to be used for the mitzvah anymore, and the Mechaber said you're allowed to throw it out, the Ramah says there's a yesh omrim, ein linoig behen minag bizoyin. You should not treat them in an oifen of bizoyin, in a lowly way, lizarkun b'mokum meguna, to throw them into a disgusting place, like to throw them in the garbage. Ela she'enan tzrichin geniza, but they don't need geniza. V'yesh bedaktik in lagoinzan, there are those who actually do geniza. V'hamakmer u'bedatik b'mitzvahs tavay alav bracha. And the Ramah says those that are medaktik and they treat this in a stringent way, tavay alav bracha. And the Mishnah Berurah over there in Siman Chaf Aleph says, Ein linig behen, you should not treat these chafetzei mitzvah with bezoyin. V'chein b'schach ha-sukkah, the same concept applies to the schach of the sukkah, the lulav, and to a lulav, the shofar, and to a shofar, la'achar shedispatlu b'mitzvasan, when they're no longer going to be used for the mitzvah, ein lezarka la'ashpa. You should not throw them in the garbage. V'chol kahai gavna, davar she'ein kavod l'mitzvah shavra. Nor should you treat it in any lowly way that is a bizayon to the mitzvah that the item was used for. In other words, it's not a bizayon to the item. It's not a bizayon to the aravas if you throw it in the ashpa, because the aravas are no longer being used for a mitzvah. But it's a bizayon to the mitzvah of daled minim. This is a chayfetz that was used for daled minim. That's the way you treat daled minim? You just throw it in the garbage? You don't do that. The kasav pri begadim denachet shel alasais tashmish beguna afilu b'tfanis hasukah. Even the walls of the sukkah you shouldn't do anything bizayandik with. Okay, now this is what's discussed in Hilchos Tzitzis in Siman Chaf Aleph. Now, if you notice, I quoted over here a couple of times. They mention over here in Siman Chaf Aleph, like the Mishnah Berurah did. He said, "V'hu adin l'chol tashmishe mitzvah kigoy sukkah v'lulav." So lulav, right? Lulav is tashmishe mitzvah. This halacha applies equally to the entire lulav, and that's why what I'm a little bit puzzled over. What I'm a little bit puzzled over is why are we mentioning specifically over here the Haishana, the Arava Shebelulav? What's the vart over here of the Haishana Shebelulav? This halacha applies equally to the entire lulav bundle, not just to the Arava Shebelulav. Yeah, so I'm just a little bit puzzled by that. I don't know what to tell you right now. I'm a little bit puzzled why we're mentioning only the Ishana Shebelulav, unless the Mechaber saved this halacha all the way to the halachas of Hashana Rabbah, because that's when you're finished with the Daled Minim. And he's telling us the halacha in the context of the Aravas, but that it's obvious that the halacha applies to the rest of the lulav as well. Okay. Now we go to Sif Tes, says the Mechaber. Yesh Bishaimer, there are those that say, this is brought down from Agos Maimoni, Yesh Bishaimer Sha'asa Lehanais bin Ha'arava La'achar Nitilasa, that you're not allowed to be nene, you're not allowed to derive any benefit from the Haishanis after you take it and do the mitzvah of Haishanis with it, in Lohisna Aleh Me'ikara, unless you made a T'nai beforehand that you're not being maktzeh it, you're not setting it aside only for the Kiyam HaMitzvah. The L'kula Yuma is Katzoy L'mitzvasa, because if you did set it aside, if you are maktzeh it for the mitzvah, so it becomes muktzah L'mitzvasa for the entire day, and therefore you can't derive benefit from the Haishanis even after you mekayim the mitzvah. Says the Ramah Hagah, the Nagu in the minig is la'atzniah Haishanis, to put away the Haishanis la'afias matzos, to burn them in the fire when you bake the matzahs, kedei lasos b'mitzvah, in order to be mekayim another mitzvah. This is always the concept that once you use something to be mekayim one mitzvah, you should use it to be mekayim another mitzvah. Similarly, there are those that by Havdalah, there's different minhagim when to light Chanukah licht, if you should light them before Havdalah or after Havdalah. Those that light after Havdalah, they light the shamish sometimes with the Havdalah candle, because since you did one mitzvah with the ner, so do another mitzvah with the ner, employ that ner to go use it to light Chanukah licht. So this is that same concept. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamed. Hisna allow, you can't be nene from the Aravas unless he made it tonight beforehand. Ayin b'Magen Avram, take a look at the Magen Avram, Shebefakfek, who argues on this, the Lav L'Kuli Alma Mahani Tanah, because he brings down that not the Tanai is not a Dover Muskim, not everybody agrees that a Tanai is efficacious. Amnam El Yerabba, Mataritz Divrei HaShulchan Aruch, V'chein B'Biur Halacha, B'Yarnu L'Kuli Almi Bahani Bazet Tanai, Ayin Sham Ba'arech. There's a lengthy Biur Halacha over here about whether the Tanai is efficacious on the Aravas or not. I'm not going to go into this Biur Halacha. I've got Laman Aleph, Me'ikara, unless you made a Tanai beforehand. Ayin B'Biur Halacha, what does this mean, Me'ikara? Does it mean before you were Mekayim the mitzvah? Does it mean before you were set it aside for the mitzvah? Etc., etc. Now we go to Sif Yud. Says the Mechaber, Yesh Mi Sha'omer, there are those that say, Sheyesh li zaher, that you should be careful, Shelo yakutz Yisrael arava lemitzvah mistei'akum, that a Yid should not cut aravas for his Haishanis from a non-Jew's field, afilu b'rishos ha'akum, even if he has the permission of the non-Jewish landowner. And this is a concept that we've discussed already several times before in the context of schach, in the context of the other dalaminim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamed Beis, afilu b'rishos ha'akum, even if the non-Jewish landowner gives you permission to cut the Haishanis, you should not yourself cut the Haishanis for your mitzvah. Mishum destam akum hakakoy shalahem gezulim me'acherim. Back in those days, there was kind of a chazaka. It was taken as a default position that the non-Jewish landowner was actually squatting on stolen land. He threw the real owner, the original owner, off, or somebody else did, and this non-Jew ended up on this field. But the assumption was that the land was stolen. And therefore, if he gives you permission to go ahead and cut the Haishanis, his permission is meaningless, because karka eidin exelis, real property never really becomes stolen. It's always becheskes marikama. It's always assumed to still belong to the original landowner. So the fact that this fellow gave you permission to go cut the Haishanis is not valid. And when you go ahead and cut those Haishanis, like the Mishnah Berurah says, v'nimtza kishekaitzetz ha'Yisrael hu hagoizel. When you go ahead and cut those Haishanis, you're actually stealing the Haishanis from the original landowner. And now you're trying to be mekayim the mitzvah with stolen Haishanis. Ella, rather, yiktzais akum, the non-Jew should cut the Haishanis and give them to you, v'yit namely Yisrael, and give them to the Yid. And in that way, you're going to be kainit, because now there's going to be Yush and Shina Rishus. Ella yiktzais akum v'yit namely Yisrael, v'wadin kishakaitzis Yisrael, v'daisel l'chavei shari. Or if you go ahead and cut it, so and give it to another Yid, so then the Yush is chal when you cut it, and then you give it to somebody else. That's the Shina Rishus. So he's kind of with Yush and Shina Rishus. U'kamasha kasavdu b'sibit tafreish b'em tes sif aleph b'mishnah Berurah sif katan yod aleph. Vayin b'taz shekosav de bezman hazel lo yamina de stamik zulam heim. The Taz writes, and we learned this previously as well, that nowadays this concept that the majority of the land is considered stolen does not apply. Vayin le'el b'simit tav reish lamed zayin sif gimel b'hagav v'mishtabura bir halacha u'b'simit tav reish mem tesif alaf b'hagav mishtabura bir halacha ka'akoil shayach le'inyanenu. Sif Yud Aleph. Imchal Yom Shana Rabba b'Yom Rishon. If a Shana Rabba falls out on a Sunday, v'katzitzu oivdei kechavim arava b'Shabbos ve'eviyoi. So a Shana Rabba is a Sunday. There's a non-Jewish landowner who knows that the Jews need these willow branches on Sunday. So he goes and he cuts the willow branches on Shabbos. So he is performing Meleches Isser. He is performing forbidden halacha of Kaitzer on Shabbos in order to bring the Yidden Aravas on Sunday on Hoshana Rabbah. The Katzitzu Evdei Kechavim Arava b'Shabbos ve'Eviyai Keshera. These Aravas are still kosher to be used for Hoshana. Says the Mishnah Katlam and Gimel ve'Eviyai Keshera. Hainu afilu tziva la Yisrael lakoitz b'shviloi. Says the B'Chavetz Chaim, this is true even if a Yid went and instructed a non-Jew, go ahead, cut those aravas, and bring them for me on Sunday. Why is this okay? Ubavadai also was Avera. The Yid who did that, Zicha did an Avera, he did Amir La'akam on a Daraisa. He instructed a non-Jew to perform Meleches Isser on his behalf, and it's Meleches Isser that's also a Daraisa. So he Zicha did an Avera, right? It's an Isser D'Rabbanan on Amir La'akam. You still can use the Ishanis because when you take those Ishanis on Sunday, Hoshana Rabbah, it's not a mitzvah b'avera. Why? Explains the Chavetz Chaim here in the brackets. Da'akar klois ha'avera, because once the avera is done and over with, right? The avera is done. The Meleches Isser was done on Shabbos. The Isser of the Yid of the Abir La'akum was done on Shabbos as well. So now, Leka Mishum Mitzvah Haba Ba'avera. We've said this concept many times. Mitzvah Haba Ba'avera is only when I'm doing the Avera in the very same act as I'm trying to be Mekayim the Mitzvah. So if you try to steal Daled Minim when you pick them up to be Mekayim the Mitzvah, that would be Mitzvah Haba Ba'avera. But if it's stolen and then you're Mekayim the Mitzvah 3 days later, that's not Mitzvah Haba Ba'avera. However, there are achronim who would take issue with this. Because this heter is based on a Rashba, and we only find that the Rashba was matir elikishitzivo be'erev Shabbos stam sheyu muzumanos loy b'motzai Shabbos v'hayayachal lekatzitzam ba'od yom. The Rashba, who is the source for the heter of the Mechaber, was not talking about when a Yid instructed the non-Jew to cut them on Shabbos. The Rashba was talking about a case where a Yid instructed a non-Jew who had aravas growing in his field on Erev Shabbos, you know what, cut aravas and bring them to me on Sunday. So then the non-Jew could have done it Friday, he could have done it Motzi Shabbos, he could have done it whenever. The non-Jew did it on Shabbos, fine. That's the case of the Rashba. We cannot extrapolate from that Rashba that the Rashba would also have been matir if a Yid instructed the non-Jew to do it on Shabbos. Okay, now we go to the Ramah. Indeed, says the Ramah, if a Yid instructed the non-Jew to cut them, and it's known, everybody knows that Ruvain went ahead and instructed Tony to cut aravas on Shabbos and to bring them to town. So it's farhesia, it's very well known. Yesh lahachmer im yesh la'arava acheres. Then certainly you should be machmer if you have different aravas to use. Even if the Yid did not mamish instructed non-Jew to cut them on Shabbos. He told the Yid a Saturday afternoon, oh, I see, Tony, I see you have beautiful willow branches growing in your field. You know, I'm going to need them tonight. So he didn't say, go cut them, but he said, I'm going to need them tonight. Even then, says the Ramah, you should be machmer. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time with Siman Tov Reish Samachay. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. Discussing Liman HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shem should send Yeshua's Refuas, Parnasa, Chiduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Kal Tzedek B'meher of Yameinu. Amen. Be well.